going to roll right into it. I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists with us today. We are going to see Kristen O'Connell again on this session, Rob Rabichuk, and Tyler Douglas, along with myself. And we'll be discussing how to identify payroll fraud schemes, safeguards that you can implement in your business to protect yourself. So without further ado, panelists, let's dive in. I've got some good questions for you. Right, my friends. I think all of us have our cameras on. Are we unmuted?
Good morning.
Good morning. We're all here. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm actually going to start with Rob on this first question. And Rob, if you want to give our folks just a little background on you and how long you've been in the payroll business before I ask the question, because I think this will give them some practicality for why you may see some of the things you've seen in the payroll world in the many years that you've been in it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikelle. I appreciate it. And thank you to the panel. And more importantly, thank you to everybody that's on the meeting today. Yeah, I've been in payroll for over 24 years. I've seen everything from leaps and bounds. Right now, obviously, the biggest thing that we're all, having issues these days is fraud. That is the biggest thing right now. It's $1 billion industry. About 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting with the FBI, and just in California alone, it's over a $3 billion industry of fraud that is happening through small businesses. So there's a lot to look at, a lot of practice, a lot of processes that really need to be following with people. But for my 24 years, I work with some very large institutes, banks that we deal with, and we deal with that on a regular basis. People are trying to get fraudulent into accounts. So there's so many things that are going on for you to be aware of, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. But 24 years, payroll, we handle all over across the country in regards to payroll. We actually are a vendor for Kronos too, which is one of the largest payroll softwares in the world. So thank you.
Yes. So our first question is, what has been the most common type of payroll fraud that organizations are facing today that you're seeing, Rob?
Yeah. Well, I mean, great question. In many cases, fraud occurs through email. I literally just was at a law firm, 75 employees. The office manager had an email from supposedly her bank saying that they needed information from her. They had her social, they had her all of her account numbers and everything. And when it came down to the question of her having that conversation, supposedly with the banker, she said, well, let me call you right back. And it was the same number for the bank, and the person actually picked up the call so they intervened on the call, and it said the name of the bank on that call. And the lady asked her, what is your passcode? And she goes, oh, I don't feel comfortable with that. And that was the end of the conversation. So they're being very creative right now of how to go about that. And if you feel that something is not right, it's not right. Yeah. Because one of the things that I came across recently with one of our attorneys, we're coming at the year end. There's a lot of bonuses going on right now. And he decided to do a $1.5 million bonus for himself. He sent it over to the relationship manager. The relationship manager said, this is not correct. Something's not right here. It came out of one account. We've never had this account before. So the RM spoke to me. I ended up calling the attorney, called the bank, called everybody who I needed to know. And he goes, well, I'm doing a transfer into this new account. I go, Dean, we've never done a process of a payroll into this account. We weren't going to process. Do you not think we're not going to, do our due diligence? Because we went ahead and send that to somebody else, and it was somebody else's account. It's gone.
Correct.
It was legit, thank God, but those are the checks and balances that we need to do more often. And back to your question, requests are coming from spoofed and hacked emails advising creditors' accounts information has changed. So it's to do all of your double checking, triple checking, and making sure that things are legit, because these are the things that people are really going after today. It's not about going into the bank and doing the OK Tombstone Corral, going to the bank and blasting shots. And the fact is, what's happening, this is happening more and more, especially to small businesses.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Tyler,
Welcome.
I'm gonna enlist you here for the second half of this question. Tyler Douglas here at Trout CPA is an IT manager for us. Does a great job of internally educating us on how can these spoof emails be identified? What are the things that we should share with our folks and our attendees today, Tyler, that would help them better understand and identify when something looks suspicious or is suspicious, and what they should do about that?
Yep. So thank you everyone for having me. Thank you all for attending. When you're getting a suspicious email, sometimes it can be very difficult to tell, because what's happening a lot now is you're having business email compromise attacks, or BEC attacks, which is essentially when a real business email gets compromised and you're getting an email from a real vendor or a real person. That can be very difficult to tell. So you have to do a little bit of a gut check and look and see, is this the way this person usually communicates with me? Is this something that should be coming through email? If somebody's asking to change their direct deposit information, shouldn't be through email. If somebody is saying, hey, our account number changed and we need you to send this to this address instead, that's not correct. If you're seeing things with very urgent messaging in them, that's usually a pretty big red flag as well. You really don't want to see, hey, this needs to be done today or X is going to happen. We're dealing with a lot more targeted attacks now, and some things we'll talk about later with how AI is implementing in that. It's getting a lot more difficult to tell, because you're not dealing with random Joe Schmo in his basement somewhere. You're dealing with a full-blown company somewhere in the world that is targeting you. If you're in payroll, you're a high-value target. They're targeting you. They're not targeting 1,000 different people. They're looking at your background and seeing what information they can get. So it's important to scrutinize everything you get before you make any kind of changes. If it doesn't look right, if you have an IT person, contact them. Otherwise, just get somebody else to look as well. Keep an eye out for any misspellings. A lot of the time you'll see, maybe jsmith@troutcpa.com is your normal email address. You might see somebody come from johnsmith@gmail.com and pretend to be, whoever John Smith is. So these are the kind of things you got to keep an eye out for. It's always good to have email security applications set up as well, but not everyone has the resources to do that. So you can always kind of just keep an eye out as well.
Thank you, Tyler. Kristen, I'm going to ask you if you can share the real world examples that you get in this area. Unfortunately, Kristen and I personally get to see things that none of us wish we would see, right? And hear about, quite honestly. So I'm going to ask Kristen the question of, can you share some real world examples of payroll scams that you've encountered, and how are they discovered?
Sure. So a couple things that are up there again with common, and we've seen, so timesheet fraud being one of them, particularly buddy punching. So, you have a friend at work and you're running late and you have that person clock you in and out. So you're not even at work yet. And someone has the ability to clock you in and out. So that's something that we have seen, unfortunately. Fictitious employees is another, the ghost employee. So there's been countless cases over the years of companies that you've seen where someone that, on the internal side that's running payroll is able to set up an employee that doesn't exist and create paychecks and direct deposits and things like that are going into a bank account that belongs to them. So that's definitely something that we've seen. And then, email account hacking and fraudulent requests is definitely up there. So they get your email. I know personally I get a ton of emails saying, hey, it's, you know, so-and-so from Trout, and how do I update my bank account? What information do you need? So that's, you know, that's another way. Years ago, I worked with a client that they determined it to be international. They were able to hack into their entire system. They had details about what GL accounts things were to hit. I mean, really specific details. Emailed someone that worked under me in a payroll department and said, hey, we have to get this vendor paid today. Can you send this money? And you know, the amount of detail that they had was incredible because they had hacked into the entire system. They were sending emails under the person that she was familiar with working with, so nothing jumped out there as, you know, it being someone out of the norm. You know, it was her email address, everything, and she sent the money. And you know, by the time it was discovered, close to $100,000 had been sent to an account, and sure enough, you know, international account within, I mean, probably a matter of hours, right? That money was gone. So, you know, these are things, you know, if you know your system has been hacked, you know, because when we reached out to the client, when it finally kind of looked suspicious, right? Unfortunately, it was, you know, hindsight. You know, they said, oh, well, our system got hacked into a couple weeks ago. So, you know, think about those things. If you know it's something that, you know, you've had issue, you know, think about anybody that, you know, of importance that might also just need to be given a heads up, like, hey, if you get any odd requests from us, you know, our system was hacked. I definitely think it's important to try to think that through and notify anybody that, you know, they may target, as Tyler said, as being, you know, a valuable source of being able to get what they want. And, you know, unfortunately, in most of the cases, they're discovered after the fact. So it becomes, you know, a lesson learned. But, you know, trying to be, you know, I get fake emails from Trout staff, people asking me things in payroll. You know, a lot of the times I know these colleagues, and just the language they use in general is just not, if you know your people, it's just not how they would word something. So that right away is, you know, is a red flag to me that it's not legit. You know, from an internal perspective, there are things that I'm not a part of, right? They're not things I handle. So that again jumps out kind of as a red flag that, you know, these people would not be contacting me to do this, you know, to do this for them. So, you know, really just trying to keep yourself as educated as possible, and reviewing processes and things, having really good processes in place will obviously, you know, help along the way.
Thanks, Kristen. I think one other thing I would reiterate to the folks attending today is we all have, at least I think most of us do, right? This wonderful thing called a telephone. I think sometimes we're afraid to use that. And instead we continue to have a conversation in an email that is actually, you know, that is actually a scam or a phishing email, right? So what we tell our staff here is, man, if it really looks legitimate to you, do not respond to the email, right? Pick up the phone and call the person personally, right? It is the best resource you have, right? And say, hello, Tyler, is this you? I, you know, got this really convincing email that's telling me you want your direct deposit changed. And Tyler Reed will say, oh my gosh, yes, that was me. Or, you know, and thanks for calling and making sure, right? So, you know, our policy is not to change anything via email. You need to make a personal contact, right, to make that change. You know, and we ask the same, that we're going to confirm it with you. If we're in your processing world, over here, you know, we're not going to take your email as the evidence that that's what should have been changed. So I would encourage each of you to do the same. And guess what? Your colleague would actually might like to take your phone call for a change instead of your email. So that would be my word of advice on that one. Next up is around we keep talking about remote work, right? And remote work brings us so many unique challenges today. We're grateful to be able to have it and do it. But life does look differently. So how has remote work and digital payroll systems impacted the risk of payroll fraud? And Rob, you can guess, you're up first.
Well, this is a short for me. It's like the risk of the fraud is always is present, right? And they said the risk of varies based on the safeguards through the best practices and policies and procedures and implementation by the business. Everybody's had some really good key things that have come up and will still continues to come up. One of the things that what Kristen made about the buddy punch, right? We actually have a face recognition. So that's one of the things that we can divert from that. Tyler mentioned about with policies and procedures is that is a key thing is the process. If anything goes outside your process, then something you need to do the red flag. And Nikelle, you made a great point. It's not about if, it's when, and it will happen. And it happens more and more. So these are the things to look out on these scenarios. So
yeah, thank you. I think the other thing to say, if you're needing help, right, with I feel like, hey, maybe it's time to review this. Do we have our SOPs in check to counteract and make sure that it's an educational opportunity? We would be happy to sit down with you, review those SOPs, right? Also educate, right? Educate. Tyler gets the gift here to come to my monthly team meeting every month to continue to educate my staff in outsourced accounting on how do we continue to just remain vigilant. We're here to help you, figure that out as well. This isn't, the pitch for us, but I want you to know that we are a good resource for you and have the things that you need, right, to maybe propel you to the next level, to be more vigilant than we are today. Yeah. And that's where we're heading with the next question is what internal controls and processes are most effective in preventing payroll fraud with your organization? And how can the technology, data analytics, and automation be leveraged to detect or prevent payroll fraud? As we always talk about in our team meetings, AI has been a great tool for us. We are definitely seeing it in all of our solutions, and payroll is not an exception. However, the inverse effect of AI is it's also helping criminals become better criminals, right? And now they can do pattern recognition even faster than they ever could, right? And because of the tools, they're reverse engineering them, right, to figure out just exactly what we're doing and bait us to thinking, right, that some of this is legit. So hence why we have to kind of make sure that our internal control processes don't allow us to become complacent in this area. It is something that we have to adapt to the technology and also fight the good fight, right, with the folks who don't necessarily leverage use the tools for greatness, but for to be bad actors. So that being said, Kristen, I'm going to start with you on internal controls because I know this is a conversation you get into a lot, lots of times, and we're always evaluating ours, here at Trout as well. So I'll start with you.
So I think there's a couple things, we're seeing become more common. So multi-factor authentication is definitely something we're seeing a ton of with the softwares that we use. I know that the majority of our softwares that we utilize, both our internal platform and some of the outsourced platforms that we work with, utilize that. So making sure that, you're using that. I know some systems do allow you to disable it, but I would not recommend that. I'm sure Tyler would agree with me there, to leave that on. So that's definitely something that we've seen more and more of. Even, as an example, we, file a lot of quarterly payroll returns, and we're even starting to see some of the tax agencies, PA Unemployment, began using that last year. So if you're trying to log in to be unemployment to file a return, you have to have an emailed code in order to be able to get in. So that's definitely something we're seeing more of by the softwares that we use internally, more specifically. So, I think segregation of duties is always a really important piece of that. The idea that someone else is kind of overlooking things that are being done, you know, or those duties are separated, right? So the person that's running the payroll, for example, is different than the person that is, reconciling at the end of the quarter and processing those returns, will help with that. You can obviously put other review pieces in place as well, even on a, daily processing standpoint. I know we have clients that sometimes, one person will enter the payroll and then there's, another process where that's reviewed before it's actually submitted by someone different. So that's obviously another internal process that can be done. Conducting payroll audits, right? Periodically, I would always recommend at least on a quarterly basis, kind of reviewing things. Will help, flag any of that kind of stuff that may be going on. To prevent it from continuing. Unfortunately, sometimes that stuff goes on for a very long time before it's caught when the items are not being reviewed kind of regularly. And then, just being mindful, when you run a payroll, I always tell, clients, it's not, you certainly don't need to sit and analyze, every single report that's available or, every single line item, but, spot check things, review your totals, right? If you notice anything that looks out of the ordinary, a lot of the payroll softwares now even will show you, kind of a history. So, here's what your last payroll came in at, here's what your current payroll looks like. That's another kind of red flag. If you're someone that's over seeing something or you're reviewing it, if you know that you didn't have a ton of changes that took place, obviously, some things are really small and would be hard to catch just, with a view like that. But, if you notice a huge swing in wages or something like that, and that you haven't made any changes, that's another kind of thing that would help you catch any of that might take place.
Thank you. Rob, anything you'd like to add on that front around internal controls? You're on mute, dear.
There you go. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Kristen is that, having those internal controls and having like a lot of times when we have a payroll, we have one person that actually oversees and they have the key to the gate of the kingdom. And then other people may have certain things that they may not be able to also see, but we have one person that controls the whole kingdom. Like, for example, Nikelle, you would have all control of everything in regards to what's going on. And then Kristen would have a piece, and then also with Tyler. So the fact is that we're able to have those controls and eliminate the staff to be able to have certain things that are in the system. So
yeah. Internal controls, obviously, accounting firms are all about making sure that we have internal controls in place and that we're actually updating and reviewing that document annually. Again, That's another best practice for us. It's something that probably doesn't, believe it or not, doesn't happen as frequently, right, as it needs to. And it is definitely a healthy habit to get yourself into. And as we mentioned, and I think Tyler will probably hit us up on this one, is two-factor authentication. Any offering that is making this optional, right? So any software that is making 2FA, two-factor authentication, optional, it's criminal at this point, right? It should be required if for anything that is having, the least amount, of sensitive data, right? And almost all of our systems have some component of sensitive data today in them. So 2FA is definitely where you and it should be a policy, right? It should be an internal control that even if there's a bypass on it, it's not what we're allowed to do, right? And there are definitely, we hear this a lot. Security is not meant to be user-friendly, right? It shouldn't be easy. I know that it slows you down. I know that, we all, sigh when we have to change our passwords, right? Every 90 days, but it's not meant to be. If it were easy, right, then it wouldn't be secure. So, we can't stress enough that this isn't about ease. It's about keeping you safe and protecting, right? What is, what should be, your payroll data needs to be super secure. There's a lot of sensitive information, right, behind those details. Tyler, anything you would want to add on the technology front around data analytics and automation, and what tools we might be able to use to help further detect some of this fraud? I know you guys we do some patterning, right? If we think something's suspicious, we have some tools that we use to help us get through this.
Yeah, if we're talking in terms of looking at payroll transactions specifically, I do see, with AI being in everything now, AI is going to get very good at pattern recognition. And, if it's not already, it's going to be implemented into just about anything that it isn't at this point. So you'll have at some point a built-in feature where it's going to look at, potential things that are fraudulent. In the world that I live in a lot of the Microsoft stuff, there's already things built in to say, hey, this login looks suspicious, because based on the user's previous history, it's probably not them. So you'll see things where it's looking at, this person's gotten this amount for the last 5 years, and now all of a sudden their bonus is tripled. So they might be looking at things like that, and it might just flag you and say, hey, this is a problem, or it might shut down whatever's happening in the future. I can't speak for what is actively in use, but I absolutely see these things becoming very prominent very soon. Yeah.
I think, Rob, you would probably iterate on this front. We see it in our banking worlds. We have whole fraud teams now that, we see a suspicious transaction, and it looks outside of the pattern of what the organization has traditionally done. And before they allow it to go through, right, they're calling you and saying, Rob, right, tell me more, right? Did you really do this? Was it you? And when I get that call personally, I couldn't be more grateful. I never, right, I'm disappointed that they called. More times than not, they were right?
Absolutely.
And there's a few occasions where it is, yep, it's me. I'm out of the state, and that was my transaction, right?
Absolutely.
But would you say, Rob, you probably hear of that? I would imagine, quite a bit, even on the reimbursement side, as we make, right, not just payroll, but reimburse our clients or employees for expenses, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we track that all the time for them. I mean, there's, like I said, everything is, as we're evolving with, with smartphones and with AI and everything that's going on, it's rapidly coming even faster for fraud. That's the crazy part, is that we're all running across this. But just to be aware, that is the most important part, is to be aware.
And that was
of
the part of, and I'm so glad you say that, this isn't to scare you, it's to educate you, right? This session, we put this in here as our final discussion today, just to make, continue to create awareness and education, and a sense of vigilance, right, for payroll fraud. So next question is, how does segregation, in the event that fraud is suspected or confirmed, how should an organization respond both internally and externally? Huge topic. I am going to let you start, Rob, on this one, because again, I feel like 24 years of experience, I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it handled many different ways.
Yeah, great question. Once the fraud is suspected, the first people in line defense is you call the bank. That's who you call first of all. The one thing that what we do with our banks is that what we do is we do positive pay. So if we're processing payroll, we're going to know the amount of what checks are going through or direct deposit that is on that queue. Now, if something is off balance, it's not going to push through. So that's one of the things that will protect the business, is that we have eyes and ears of what is actually supposed to be going on. Now, This has happened is that we've gone ahead to process the payroll, and the client they haven't agreed to it. They have not submitted it. So it bounces back. And they're like, well, what's going on? I go, well, you denied it. You have to push the payroll through, right? And that also goes on the tax side too.
It does.
Because we
It does.
got to make
Yep.
sure that the taxes are paid on a timely manner, because if the taxes are delayed, what happens, right? We all know there's penalties and fines that are behind that. So we want to make sure that we communicate. The nice part with us is what we have is that all of our clients have a direct relationship manager. So there's that communication line, right? If things happen over the weekend, I get clients that call me on the weekend. That's what my phone is for. It's for them to call me if something like this occurs, because I have the means to be able to stop something on our end for it to go through, that is protecting. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we want to protect our clients of what's going on, because a lot of times our clients are with other payroll providers and they've come over to us and they like, how come we didn't know this? Well, it doesn't matter. We're here to help you, to educate you, because education is key, especially in today's market, right? It's really important. So.
Kristen, how about you? When we see we've identified that it has been, right? So we've called the bank. We now know that it's fraud. What do we do next?
So I think, on a small scale, obviously notifying, anybody that would be affected internally, the employee, and letting them know what's transpired, I think is important. On a larger scale, depending on the scenario, you would definitely need to notify your insurance provider. You would need to file a proof of loss. Make sure you're gathering evidence and anything you have to support, what's transpired, because you'll need to provide that to them. In the event you think it's an employee directly that had something to do with it, make sure that anything from their office, computer documentation, anything like that stays put, because it will be, it will be needed. But I think, reassurance too, in some ways, if you really are, again, on a small scale, it's an isolated incident, you've done anything you can to put controls in place to prevent it from happening again, is then, communicating what's been done and giving that reassurance that, you've done everything you can to ensure it's not going to happen again is definitely going to try to help rebuild some trust and confidence, in whoever may have been affected by it.
And in the event you should actually have an internal breach where you had an internal source be, right, where the fraud was occurring, we have a forensics, accounting forensics specialist here at the firm. We also have forensic IT partners to help, right, further run this down if it were to be something that was actually occurring internally. So again, what we say this often here in outsourced client accounting services is, if you see something, say something, right? It's not necessarily you to figure out, how to solve it, but you have a ton of resources here at the firm. We have tons of partners outside of the firm that we partner with, vendors that these are things that they deal with. These are real life circumstances that can help us, that can help you should these situations occur. And then again, I think on the fraud front, once we know that it has happened, it is acting as quickly as possible, right? Time is of the essence when it comes to payroll fraud. So we are down to our last 10 minutes. So I am going to ask, hopefully we can get through 2 more questions. So I have a pretty good one that is, what emerging trends in payroll should organizations be aware of, and how can they stay ahead of the threat? We kind of asked this question already, but I think one that we have absolutely seen as an emerging trend is the constant wanting to change your direct deposit, right? I think that's a big trend. that we continue to see. And the other one that, seems to be emerging is, as Rob mentioned, these phone calls, right? Your bank is not going to call you and ask you, right, for your password, right? Not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So if you're, the same as, they're not going to send you an email, right, asking you for it either. Not going to happen. So you should just hang up the phone if somebody calls you and asks you that question, right? If you want to be super vigilant, you can call your bank and let them know, right, that they are being spoofed. I certainly know, I've gotten alerts from my bank that, hey, we know people are calling. We're letting you know we're not doing this, right? So if there is a campaign that's going out, from a fraudulent group, I'm telling you, and I think Tyler would agree with me on this statement, when they see success, at one, lending institution, they start to pray, right? That's the theme. That's the trend, right? So if they can break into one, they're going to keep trying to get more of you who are at it. The problem is we don't know who the target is, right? The target's always moving. So I would say that that's the trend. Panelists, is there any of you that want to add to any of those trends?
Yeah, the one thing that I can highly recommend, and obviously you have probably a good relationship with whoever your RM or your VP of your bank, and I'm sure that you probably all have their direct cell phone, right? So those are the ones that you want to talk to. It's not just somebody saying that they're from the branch or they're from the organization, is to talk and to speak with directly to your RM or your VP at your bank. That's what I would highly recommend.
Excellent. Yes, and banking relationship managers are good for a multitude of things, shall we say?
Yes.
I'm sure they're probably not joining our call today. Maybe we need to encourage them next year to sit on this, because there's definitely some things that you all can follow up with them on. The other thing that I think Rob makes a good mention of, if for some reason and this probably happens more so, we see it in smaller local community banks, their treasury applications are not quite as rich in feature set, where positive pay may not be an option. But if it is an option, we do say that is a great safeguard for a multitude of reasons, not just because of payroll fraud, right? Just fraud in general. There's a lot of ongoing check fraud that we continue to see. We also strongly encourage, right, not writing checks when you can avoid it. If that continues to be something you're doing and feel like you're struggling to get, to move into the digital age, by all means, reach out to your contact manager. We've got solutions around that as well. But we definitely are big proponents of, if you have to have checks, live checks, positive pay is the way to keep you secure on those live checks. And should that also get into the wrong hands, right, in the mail, you have more action that can be taken on the bank's part, right? The bank will support you if you use the process. If you don't use the process, guess what? They're not responsible.
Right.
So
the one,
they're not there to help you.
Yeah, the one thing that I see, Nikelle, especially that our clients that are still using checks, is that the employees will go to a check cashing place and they'll charge, 5, 10, 15%. That's where the identity comes in, because they'll just leave the check on the counter. Somebody can be walking by and take a picture and do washout on the check, and then they can go ahead and start using that check. So we obviously use direct deposit, and we use a Visa reloadable debit card for payment for employees. So the big thing is that on check cashing places, because like I said, that's where the compromising on the bank accounts happen a lot, because that's what I deal with on the bank side.
Yeah. It is, I can't stress enough. It's not, I'd love to tell you we don't hear that either, right, Rob, but I'd be lying, right?
Yeah.
So we do hear instances of check fraud. We definitely know of instances where, where it's occurring and the bank is, is actually mandating, right? Hey, using positive pay, we've had it, and now it's no longer an option for you not to use it. You must start using it, right?
Yeah.
Or you're too much of a risk, from a client perspective for us otherwise. So
Yeah.
again, do not shy away from it. It is a tool and a security resource, for you. And if you're being charged for it, it's worth the cost, right? It's your insurance policy. Look at
Right.
it as such.
Yeah. And
Again,
it also is a
it's
liability
not
too.
meant to be. It's not meant to be easy or necessarily cost effective, right? It's here to keep you secure. I mean, security has a cost,
Yeah.
the same as we would put it in our house, the same as we do it in our business, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
lastly, I'm going to leave you all with a minute for any last pieces of advice, things you'd like to share with the group. And then I do have one question actually in our Q&A that I'd like to answer. So Kristen, I'll start with you.
I think just kind of going back to a lot of things we've heard today, even part of Michael's presentation was automation, as much as you can, the payroll softwares and systems that are out there, looking ahead to 2025, the theme is that they're going to be really dedicating and prioritizing, advancing, data and security measures. A lot of these systems, that we work with daily already have a lot of these things in place to try to prevent some of these things. The multi-factor, a lot of the systems we use have a geofencing, ability built in order to prevent, timesheet fraud and employees, having breakfast somewhere and clocking in and out. So really, the more things that we can automate and take advantage of those things that they have put in place to try to help alleviate some of that risk is always a good thing. Make sure that you're staying up to date on regulations, you're reviewing information regularly, make sure you're keeping accurate records. I know we all are inundated with, things every day, but really having those records, on hand, and you're reviewing employees, you have employees classified correctly, all of these things, that we can put in place, will hopefully result in, a proactive approach, to preventing some of this, from happening.
Excellent. Rob, you?
Yeah, well, today there's been I've learned things, and we're always learning, especially in the payroll world. And, there's so many things that what we do. But for me, I'm an open door. If there's questions that you may have, I'd be happy to answer them, because we deal with so many different businesses, right? Across the world, across the country and all over the world that we deal with payroll. But more importantly is to making sure that you have all your checks and balances. One of the things that I've seen this year more than anything is PAGA and class action lawsuits. Having a right time and attendance in place, making sure that people are clocking out on the 5th hour, overtime, and time and attendance is huge. Timesheets are a thing in the past. You have to have a time in process. Kristen mentioned about, having the geofencing. We have the geofencing. Someone could be down at Starbucks and they're trying to clock in to their, to where they're supposed to work. We prevent from those things happening, because that's where the employees start to run the asylum, right? The fact is we want to have a process in place, but you have to have that. And if you're not how to go about that, then that's where you kind of get lost, right? So those are the things that we can bring to the table, in regards to helping you. But, watch out for the fraud. The fraud is the biggest thing right now, more than anything. Like I said, I had a meeting about 2-3 weeks ago with the FBI, and it's turning into, on a small business scale, they're targeting all the small businesses right now. So make sure you dot those I's and cross those T's. We're coming into 2025, a lot of new things coming on board. So be safe, and best to everybody and their families over the holidays.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
Tyler.
Yep. So with what Rob had just said there about the fraud and phishing and things like that, just one of the most effective things you can do as a business is make sure your employees are trained how to spot these things and what to do if they do spot something. It's never going to stop, and you're never going to be able to prevent every single email from coming into your employees' inboxes. So you got to make sure that when people receive these things, they know what to look for, and they know, like we said before, process. If you have a set process for how things should be handled, if something is outside of that, that should be already a red flag. Now, to jump back a little bit with what Nikelle had said previously, if you're getting an email like that and she said call them, make sure you're not calling the number from the sketchy email. Because what a lot of the time will happen is, similar to what Rob had said, you'll call that number, somebody's going to answer, but it's not going to be the person you're looking for. Best case scenario, you walk over to their office, but with remote work and things like that now, it's not always going to be possible to do that. So just make sure that you're training your users, making sure they're equipped to be able to handle the situations that are being presented to them. Another thing you can do is phishing simulations. If you have the resources to do that, I highly recommend it. We do that here at Trout, and it's been very effective for us because we can get a real idea of, who's more likely to fall for these things and how can we help them catch these things in the future by training them up. So I strongly recommend that. If anyone has any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you out with that. Kind of point you in the right direction there.
Thank you. Thank you, each of you on the panel today. I appreciate you making the time, sharing your real life, experiences. And as Tyler said, it doesn't stop here, right? It's always going to continue. It's always going to be us chasing, the next new scheme, right? That's coming out. But we did have one question, which was, hey, we've recently changed our checking account and need to update our customers that pay us via ACH. How would you recommend we get that new information out? Well, here's how we would recommend you not get that information out, right? Which is email all of your your customers what your bank and routing information is. Do not do that, right? You are going to, and this is going to, again, slow you down. I get it, because automation is the key, right? And we all like to do things quickly. But this is a thing that actually you should take your time and methodically go through. You should reach your contact that you have within these customer organizations, right? That needs to know this information, and share it with them.